Week one is finally here. It feels like it's taken us all year long to get here, but finally college football has returned. We've got some games this weekend. We have some scrimmage news to talk about. I need to turn your attention to some true freshmen around college football that, quite frankly, you don't want to not miss out on. And then finally, we need to talk about some recruits that are making some big decisions. As always, y'all know the drill. If you're coming in here, hit the like button, hop down into the chat. Let's talk some college football. It's a great time to be a college football fan. There is plenty for us to talk about. And I think the best thing for us to do to lead this off is cover the two games we're going to be seeing this weekend. I think it's the perfect place to start. And there's a question that I've had for a while. What does Notre Dame look like, especially as Freeman is in another year of coaching? Tommy Rees is no longer there. They finally settled on a quarterback. They get out the transfer portal. Mayer no longer there, enters the draft. Notre Dame is a fascinating team to me, and they open up this weekend against Navy, and that's going to be a game you can bet your bottom dollar I'm going to be watching to try and gain some insight into who the Irish will be this upcoming season. I think there's a lot of excitement around the Irish because I think whenever there's a situation where your team has questions, those questions can either create frustration or excitement. And I think in the case of a team like Notre Dame, in a case of a team like Alabama, those questions are creating excitement. And that to me is a really fun place to be. Whenever we talk about Notre Dame, I think my biggest thing I'm going to be zeroed in on in this game, what does the offense look like? Because the Notre Dame offense was a unit that was up and down last year, but that was largely because they had a quarterback room that could not stay healthy. It was constant shuffling. Well, they went in the transfer portal and got a guy they really liked. However, Tommy Rees then made a move after they got that guy. Tyler Buckner transfers out after he seemingly lost the starting job, but now the quarterback depth at Notre Dame is something we're going to be watching. What does this offense look like without Tommy Rees, without Michael Mayer? That to me is going to be so fascinating to see because Notre Dame will go and play a team like USC, and I've been talking about this for a long, long time. That's a game I cannot wait to see. But if you're Notre Dame, you can't go in there and hope, oh, we're just going to stop USC from scoring and hopefully we'll find the end zone once or twice. Yes, I know USC isn't known for having a phenomenal defense. We're going to talk about that deeper whenever we turn our attention to the next game. But at the same time, you've got to be able to score points. I said this about USC, and I'm going to carry it over for any other team. You have got to be balanced in college football. You can't be one-dimensional and win a national championship. Not anymore. The game has changed too much. There are way too many smart coordinators. There are way too many brilliant head coaches, and there are way too many teams with athletes that can do a ton. You have got to be balanced in college football now. I don't believe that you can have the number one offense in the nation, but have a defense that ranks as the number 100 defense in the nation and win a national championship. And until I'm proved wrong, that's going to be my belief going forward. Much the same, I don't believe you can have a phenomenal defense, but no semblance of an offense. Because if your defense is on the field for 90 plays at a certain point, something's going to give way. The dam will eventually break. You need to be able to make sure you're maintaining that dam. What's the best way to do that? Keep your defense on the sideline. Let them get a breather. Get some offensive drives together. It's why control football is something that's always stood out to me. I know it's not the high-flying, sexy, we're going to score 100 points on you. We're going to throw it down the field. It's going to be ESPN top 10 plays. But control football is very, very important. And that's one of the reasons why Georgia was such an interesting team to me last year. Yes, they could throw the ball around on you, but if they needed to pin their ears back and say, no, we just want to grind this game out and control you, well, they could do that. It's one of the biggest questions I have for Michigan this year. Yes, Michigan has the control factor down, but if they develop that extra wrinkle in their offense, something we'll talk about if time allows, Michigan could be a very fun team. So we're going to put a bookmark in that. Notre Dame, Navy, a game I'm sure all of us are going to be watching. I think Notre Dame is going to have to come in there, play solid football, because the one thing you know about Navy, even though Notre Dame is a more talented team, Navy's a very disciplined football team. And we talked about this on Friday whenever we were talking about USC playing a Utah. You cannot overlook disciplined football teams. You just don't do it because they'll get you. And so this is going to be a game we have to watch. But let's talk about the other game we're going to see this weekend, and that's USC versus San Jose State. Now, this one isn't going to carry the intrigue, right? USC is going to blow the doors off of San Jose State. And I'm not sitting here claiming we are going to see anything new about USC. Look, my biggest question about USC going into this year is, what is your defense going to do? How is your defense going to have improved, especially coming off of the conversation we just came off of, where I maintain you have to be a balanced football team. I'm not claiming you have to have the number one offense, number one defense, but I am claiming you can't have the number one offense and the worst defense, or vice versa. There has to be some sort of symbiosis between the two, and that's when I think everything is going to be working the best. So I don't think we're going to get those answers from USC this weekend. I think we're going to have to wait. But what we can figure out this weekend for USC is, are some of the players they were high on that they recruited coming in here and making some moves forward? That to me is going to be very fascinating, because when we look at the USC recruiting class, there are a few positions that they got I'm really excited about. Tackett Curtis, the linebacker. Now, if they can get him up to speed, get him into a rotational position, that's going to be fascinating to watch. But USC already had some linebackers from last year they returned that I think they feel good about, and Shane Lee and Eric Gentry. Now, both of those guys are going to have to step up, obviously. They are the leaders of this defense, but they have talent. My biggest area of question isn't necessarily the linebackers, though I am really excited for it. Tackett Curtis coming out of the state of Louisiana. I thought it was really interesting that Lincoln Riley was able to walk there and get that win, especially with some of the other teams that were after Curtis. He's a very gifted player, a very athletic player, and someone who I think is going to do great things in college football. Really excited to see once he gets his opportunity. We talk about this all the time with other defenses. What is your defensive line going to do? Because if your defensive line is not plugging up holes, if your defensive line is not getting in there, gnashing their teeth and hitting those big bodies up front, your linebackers are going to have a really hard time running free and doing what they need to do. And that was something that hurt USC last year. So what does your defensive line look like for the Trojans? Now, in fairness, they went out in the transfer portal. They got an Anthony Lucas, a former top 100 prospect in the nation coming out the state of Arizona. He heads back west. Anthony Lucas, out of high school, had committed to Texas A&M, was a part of that historic Texas A&M class, but he was along the defensive line. And one thing we do need to understand, because there's a lot of stigma with the guys transferring from A&M, and a lot of people are saying, oh, well, those guys right there weren't worried about football. There were some people that transferred out of A&M that were doing wild things, but that wasn't the case for everybody transferring out of A&M. And in fact, when we look at an Anthony Lucas, in my opinion, this is just an example of an individual who committed to A&M, committed to a room that had how many five-star defensive linemen in the room prior, and they had gotten in that class plus the class after. He decided to look elsewhere, which was a fantastic addition for USC, but that wasn't all they did. They doubled down. They get Bear Alexander from Georgia, a former five-star, to go over there. So if the USC defensive line can inflict their will, that's going to be a great measuring stick for USC. But like I said, we cannot in good faith use San Jose State as a true measuring stick for the Trojans. It's just not what we can do, right? That's going to be a game that they can sleepwalk in and obliterate them. I talked to you earlier about how you need balance. Forget needing balance whenever USC is playing San Jose State. Caleb Williams is going to go in there and slaughter them, or at least they should. Same thing can be said with Nevada. Now, Stanford is one of those teams that has not been good. I'm really interested to see what happens with Stanford moving forward, but Stanford plays a disciplined brand of football, at least sometimes, right? Like, this current Stanford team is all over the place, but Stanford historically growing up for me was known for their physical brand of football. They were going to be a hard-nosed defensive team in the Pac-12, but they were going to play disciplined football. So I'm excited to see Stanford, but if we're being objectively honest here, even as much as I want USC to be tested, as much as I want to see how they try and pass the test, I don't know that Stanford is the test, nor do I know that Arizona State is the test. Colorado, while I'm very excited for them, that's not the test either. The test for USC is going to come down here whenever we get into this game stretch where they go Notre Dame, Utah, Cal, Washington, Oregon, UCLA. That is a brutal stretch of games I'm really excited for. Now, there's a flip side to this. USC gets to have some tune-up games before they go there. I know this is a little bit harsh, calling San Jose State a tune-up game, calling Nevada a tune-up game, calling Stanford a tune-up game. But let's be honest, the talent disparity between USC and every team I just mentioned is palpable. Arizona State is a team that I think if you've been around this channel, you know I'm really excited about the future. Kenny Dillingham coming from Oregon, going to Arizona State. He made some phenomenal hires, especially in a Rashad Samples, a Brian Carrington, keeping those pipelines to the state of Texas. Phenomenal stuff. They're coming off of a really messy situation. They had a mass exodus in the transfer portal a few years ago. That's going to be some building that needs to occur there. The same can be said for Colorado. Coach Prime just came in there, cleaned house. And while I think that their base now is going to be exciting to watch, I don't think that people need to be sitting there expecting Coach Prime to win 7-8 games his first year, because that's just not going to happen. That was a one-win team. They're going to win some games, but temper your expectations now. They're not going to be an 8-win team. If they win 4 games, mission successful. It is going to be a massive turnaround, a true rebuild for Coach Prime in Colorado. So that's something we need to keep in mind. Arizona, they're trying to build some things. Actually got a 5-star edge in this class. Really talented prospect. That's going to be one we have to watch, as I've always posed the question, who will be the Notre Dame in this recruiting class? Which team is going to have their 5 stars, have their blue chip 4 stars, and then watch them go away by the end of the recruiting class? Maybe Arizona is that answer. We'll find out. But that's October 7th. And so you don't have a real test until October 14th if you're USC. Once again, I say this all the time. There's not a person in the world who's going to question the USC offense. That right there would be the wrong question to ask. At every level, I have faith. The offensive line, I'm really curious to see how it improves, because that's one area I have been really perplexed that Josh Henson has not recruited better, is that offensive line, especially with what he did at Texas A&M, where he put together a really strong Texas A&M offensive line, especially one that was patchworked, filled with some freshmen. Van Edwards in the chat. Van, you'll know this. That freshman offensive line that they brought out there against Alabama, complete patchwork. Josh Henson had them boys playing like they were hemmed up. I mean, they played a grown man game of football that day against a Will Anderson, against some crazy guys. But I have been blown away that we have not seen it translate into recruiting wins. So let's really hone in here and talk about USC, right? So we know the USC offense, that's not a question. The USC defense has got to come together, but which layers am I looking at? I like Coach Williams at the secondary, the defensive back coach. In fact, I've said this multiple times. I think it was Lincoln Riley's best move, maintaining and retaining Coach Williams there. I think it helped them land a 5-star who could be big for them this year, and Damani Jackson, as he is fully healthy, track star, really excited for his upside. So the secondary has some guys in it. I think that they're going to obviously want for more, but they were able to generate turnovers last year. That's the one thing that the Grinch defense was able to do, is generate turnovers. The linebacking core, like I said, look, Shane Lee is a very smart linebacker. Alabama fans, you'll know him. He came in true freshman year, and due to injury was able to play for the Crimson Tide. He is a very, very cerebral football player. In fact, if we were to turn back the clock and go back to 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, Shane Lee would be tailor-made for that era of football. He's just so smart, so gifted, that you can put him in this era of football and he's out there working. He is a welcome addition to that USC defense. He is going to be a real rock for that defense to be able to rely on. But then there's Eric Gentry at the linebacker position. Really love what he brings to the table at 6'6", the freaky size he has, the athleticism he brings to the table. He just needs to continue growing. He's very green, very raw. The more experience he gets, the better it will be. But that defensive line is where I still stay, and I have to ask questions. You get Bear Alexander, you get Anthony Lucas, you get Braylon Shelby in recruiting. I like all the additions. Is it going to be enough? It's one thing for me to sit here and say, you got this guy, and this guy. Is it going to be enough? It's impossible to know until the season gets here. But for Alex Grinch, for USC, you certainly hope that that answer is yes. Because the inherent barrier for USC from now until they get it figured out will be that defense. And for USC fans, I apologize because this is me being a little bit of a broken record. This is the third time, I believe, since January we've had this conversation. So, in fairness, not as many times as, we may have heard this conversation through ESPN or through other publications, but we've had this conversation several times. Just dedicated talking about USC doing a dive into the Trojans. But entertain me this, USC fans. It is perplexing to me to see an offense ran with Caleb Williams, see the growth he had, and still say, I don't know that I'm worried about Caleb winning a national championship with all of the weapons he has because of the defense. And that's not unique to Caleb and Lincoln last year. That's something that we have talked about for years now. Now, in fairness, whenever Alex Grinch and Lincoln Riley were with Oklahoma, I would bring this up all the time, but I would have to give credit where credit is due. The defense was improving. Year by year, the defense got a little bit better, and then it got a little bit better, and then it got a little bit better until it didn't. Until year 3 came around, I believe, and the defense didn't get any better. It regressed. And it regressed a decent statistical amount. With Oklahoma, the question was never offense. With USC, the question will never be offense, but there has to be a certain point in time where both sides of the ball matter. Because in order to win in football, you have to be 100% in. And it's fascinating to me to see a coach who I do consider to be a brilliant mind in football, in Lincoln Riley. I do consider him to be a brilliant mind. I think we can have our conversation about that, and I think everybody, once we get down to the nitty-gritty, will agree. He's a brilliant mind in college football, but it is perplexing to be a brilliant mind in college football and to have the same problem stare at you again and again and again. There is a great quote about insanity that I'm sure you all know, but I'm going to tell you anyways. Doing the same thing, yet expecting different results is insanity. So where does that leave us for USC? USC is a team that a lot of people have playoff expectations on this year. Now, I've said this before. Would I be shocked if USC made the college football playoffs? No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. Because we have seen teams make the college football playoffs off of phenomenal offense. They have that. They do have that. I maintain until I see it, you cannot win a national championship until you're balanced. It's just not going to happen because you might make it into the college football playoffs, USC, but let's play devil's advocate here. Let's say Georgia and Bama get in and then Michigan. So you're looking at Michigan, Georgia, Bama, USC. Now, out of all of those teams, I can grant you instantly USC's offense in theory, sitting here right now, not one game has been played, but on paper, the USC offense with Lincoln Riley, that's going to be the best offense among the four, right? Let's be very honest here. Michigan has the ability to be a spectacular offense, but I have one question about Michigan, and it's not a damning question, but it is one that I am very curious to see if they figure out. But if we look at those four teams, if I give you USC, Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, right, as your four playoff teams, I think we could all come together and reasonably say that USC would have the most potent offense because they have Caleb Williams, returning Heisman Trophy winner. He showed great growth last year. If he carries that over into this year, my word. But I'm not going to speak for those teams, but I am just going to give you my opinion. I don't think Michigan, Georgia, and Bama would look at USC and say, that's the team we don't want to play. In fact, I think if you asked Michigan, who do you want to play for your first playoff game, they would point to USC. I think if you asked Georgia, who do you want to play, they would point at USC. I think if you asked Alabama, who do you want to play, they would point at USC. And not to disrespect USC, because USC's offense is that good. But it's the notion of, when I look at the other teams, I know they're bringing a defense that's going to be worth their salt. I know they're bringing a defense that at worst will be a top 40 defense in college football. At worst. I mean, if any of those defenses, Michigan, Georgia, and Alabama, are outside the top 25, the fan bases will collectively scream. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. But whenever we're talking USC, they're coming into this year with a defense I very much well hope will be improving. I don't mean this to sound like it's going to be a negative forever. Change is necessary. Change is constant. So it will change. But you have to enact change. You have to be an agent of change. And right now, we just haven't seen that. It was why I was so perplexed that they didn't make a move at defensive coordinator. Now, I can respect loyalty. I have a lot of respect for loyalty. I grew up in a small town, right? So you come to respect loyalty because it's one of those situations in small towns, as the viewers who are from small towns will know, word gets around. You do one thing wrong, word gets around. So you must be very loyal to people, to your word, to everything you do. I respect loyalty, but I also respect going to the next level and doing whatever it takes to get to the next level. And if USC's defense has not improved at the end of this year, I don't think that their defense is going to be set for some massive jump in the Big Ten. The reason why I say that is because we've seen Alex Grinch in the Big Ten. The one area where I thought the speed defense could really come into its own and he could learn how to maximize it was in the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is done. The Pac-12 has dissolved. It's no longer. That was the area where I thought, okay, if you're Alex Grinch, you can take this scheme of defense, take it to the Pac-12. You got it. You originated it in the Pac-12. We're very successful with it in the Pac-12 originally with Washington State. You can take it to the Pac-12, perfect it, and then you can bring it wherever you need it to go, right? Just get the details worked out. Well, now they're moving to the Big Ten. I don't need to tell you all the last time the Alex Grinch defense was in the Big Ten. It did not go well. In fact, he was only the defensive coordinator for Ohio State for 1 year. He inherited a top 25 defense. He left with a defense that was ranked like 70th. Not good. Total regression. If that USC defense isn't a top 65 unit this year, what do they do? This is just a phenomenal question to ask yourself. It's a phenomenal question to think about. I don't know what the answer will be, but I find it hard to believe if the defense hasn't had major improvements that Alex Grinch makes the journey from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten. So USC, fantastic team. I'm very excited for them. I want them to be back, but they have got to give the respect to the defensive side of the football that side demands. That's going to be something we have to watch. Let's hit some comments real quick. Crazy how Arizona got the top offensive and defensive players in their state for the first time. I know, man. I know. Really intrigued about Arizona. USC has to retool that O-line and get the defensive line more beefy 100%. 100%. I didn't realize Bear was only a sophomore. Yeah, he's got a lot left in him. USC is a team that has close to enough talent to make some noise. I'm just not sure their coach puts enough emphasis on getting a coach to run a defense efficiently. I 100% agree. If we look offensively, they have all the talent on the offensive side of the ball, barring some questions to the offensive line. But even then, when we talk about the scheme that Lincoln can come up with, the way Lincoln can mitigate some offensive line woes, and when your quarterback is Caleb Williams, your offensive line is still the most important position group on the field, but you can get away with an offensive line that isn't perfect whenever you have Caleb, right? So that's a great point, Van. But I love your back end point here, that there has got to be a change in order for that to maximize. And Bishop is asking a great question here. Competitive depth. Georgia, Alabama have competitive depth. Does USC? No. No, they don't, Bishop. And in fairness, I need to be very fair here. That's not necessarily Lincoln's fault. He just got there. So you're 100% right. They don't have that. I can't necessarily put that all on Lincoln right now because he just got there. Much the same way I can't put Brent Venables' situation. I can't be too critical of him because you just got there. You had to work with what you had to work with. And let's be honest, for Brent Venables inheriting Oklahoma, he was working with a bunch of guys that were coming in there to play the speed defense. And now he's like, okay, well, I don't need your speed defense. I need some defense. So there was a total philosophy change. And USC, I mean, they were just middling in ineptitude for so long. I can't necessarily blame Lincoln for the lack of competitive depth because he just got there. But at the same time, I will meet you halfway, Bishop. I have been shocked that their recruiting classes have not looked more like Brent Venables' recruiting classes with Oklahoma. Let's meet each other halfway there, right? Because I think if you and I were sitting at a table talking, you would agree with me that it's hard for me to blame Lincoln for the lack of competitive depth when he just got there and USC was a laughingstock for a while under Clay Helton. But at the same time, one of the biggest reasons you left Oklahoma is you said you needed to be in an environment that allowed you to recruit the best of the best. Now, maybe I'm a hyper-competitive person, but if I'm leaving a job and I say I need to get out of here to go over there so that I can be the best, I would make it my life's mission to never let that come back and bite me in the butt. Ever. Oh, I would have the best. I would make sure we had the best NIL. There would be no way. If I was Lincoln, I would put my foot down. I would draw a line in the sand, and I would say, there's no way Brent Venables is going to out-recruit me again. Like, that would be my entire life mission. Because you said you needed to leave. One of the reasons was for recruiting. Then why is Brent recruiting? I mean, don't get me wrong. USC's recruiting as well, but Brent and them are out there recruiting, boy. I mean, they're out there really getting it. So we talked about USC, but we need to actually keep our attention on USC because the next topic actually will lead off with USC. True freshmen turning heads around college football. So college football is here. Let's talk about some true freshmen you need to be watching out for because I think they're going to make a lot of noise. And we're going to start with USC. They got a wide receiver that I think is going to be special. Zachariah Branch, one of the top prospects in the nation, an unbelievable talent. If we look at the 24/7 Sports Composite, he came as the number 7 player in the nation, the number 1 wide receiver, the number 1 player in the state of Nevada, playing for Bishop Gorman. So he's battle tested in games. Whenever he practiced in high school, he was practicing against cats that were going to go play college football. And he brings a level of juice to the table that you rarely see. We can talk about guys that have speed, that have explosiveness, but the way that it comes together for Zachariah Branch, if I'm not mistaken, a kid who hit multiple 10.26s, 10.27, 100-meter dash before ever getting to college. Yeah, he's got a different level of juice, and now you give him Lincoln Riley, and now you give him Caleb Williams, and now you give him some of the other weapons that he can play off of a Dorian Singer. Man, Zachariah Branch, I think everybody in the nation, if you have a notebook out and you're saying, what are the freshmen I need to watch? That's one. Zachariah Branch with USC. Shorter guy, going to be working out the slot, in my opinion, a lot, but I think one of the reasons you work him out the slot is the pre-snap motion that Lincoln Riley will run. Move him around, isolate him, figure out what the defense is going. If you can get him on a safety, it's game over. It's done. It's done. There's not going to be a safety out there that will comfortably want to cover him one-on-one. He has got a different type of burst, a different type of change of direction. Zachariah Branch is the first true freshman you need to be watching out for. We go from USC to the Oklahoma Sooners, where I have 2 for you. One on offense, one on defense. We're going to start on the offensive side of the ball because we just came from the offensive side of the ball. And ironically, we are staying in the wide receiver room where Jaquez Petaway is a name I am as excited for as any wide receiver on this Oklahoma roster, not named Jaleel Farouk. But that's just because I think it's no secret at this point. Really excited to see what Jeff Levy is going to do with Jaleel Farouk this year, especially coming off of the year he just had where he used Farouk as a straight up chess piece, and it was so much fun to watch. So super excited to see what Farouk does this year. But Petaway, that's a wide receiver for the Oklahoma Sooners that can add a level of juice that can keep a defense honest. If Oklahoma has a situation where maybe the offense is sputtering a little bit, if you have that guy that the defense knows, hey, one play action, if we're not disciplined, it's done. It's going to be a long touchdown. That allows them to soften up a little bit. Your safeties, your defensive backs, and especially your defensive coordinator, they have to be more cognizant about what they're calling. Because a guy like Petaway, well, he can be a blitz breaker. Okay, you want to blitz your linebackers, let's just run a slant right into the open space. If it's man through and the safety's on him, because once again, I think that he'll be a guy working out the slot a lot. I think that Oklahoma likes some of the outside guys they have. You put Farouk out there, maybe an Andrell Anthony. You get Petaway working out the slot. I mean, you could go 4 wide and get really funky. You could go 3 wide and get really funky with the time. I mean, you have a lot of options, I think, and that's the beauty of the Oklahoma offense this year with Jeff Lebby is you do have some flexibility. And I think historically, just looking at how Jeff Lebby calls games, there's a lot to be excited about there. But Petaway is a name that could be a really important figure for this Oklahoma offense. Keeping defenses honest, keep him in your mind. Let's flip to the defensive side of the ball for the Oklahoma Sooners, because then we're talking about Peyton Bowen. I know Adebayor is the 5-star defensive lineman. He's going to garner a lot of attention, and deservedly so. He is freakish, 7-foot wingspan. But just like coming out of high school, he's green. He's raw. He's still got a lot of development to go, which is a great thing if you are Todd Bates, if you're Miguel Chavez, and if you're Brent Venables, because you have a guy that you already like so much in Adebayor, but then you're sitting here saying, man, he hasn't even scratched the surface of his development. We have a player we can really mold here. Unbelievably gifted, hasn't even scratched the surface. So Adebayor, keep your mind on him, but Peyton Bowen, playing his high school football at Denton Guyer, right next to where I currently sit, right down the road. A fantastic player at the high school ranks that you knew was going to be a problem once he got to college football. Now, whenever the spring game came around, it became clear he was going to be a guy you needed to keep up with. Had a great interception, had some great plays, and he has continued to generate buzz ever since. Coming out of high school, Peyton Bowen ranked as the number 16 player in the nation per the 24/7 Sports Composite, the number 2 safety in the nation, and the number 3 player in the state of Texas. In addition, Oklahoma was over the moon they were able to get because, 1, super talented player on the defensive side of the ball, necessary, but 2, it keeps your pipeline to Denton strong. There's a lot of talent in the city of Denton now. You've got Denton Guyer, you've got Denton High, you've got Denton Braswell, you've got Denton Ryan. I mean, there's so much talent here, and that's not even talking about some of the surrounding areas where within 35 minutes you're at some of the other big-name schools in Texas. Fantastic to keep a pipeline there, but especially when you get a guy that, if you listen to reports, they're saying, hey, we have a little bit of a problem with Peyton Bowen, and not a problem in the traditional sense of the word, where it's like anything he does is an issue. Quite the opposite. So rewire your brain real fast, because when I say we have a little bit of a problem in a good way, the problem that I've ascertained that the Oklahoma staff right now has with Peyton Bowen, they don't know where to put him because he's making plays everywhere. Like, they have a really good issue where they have a player and they're like, okay, we put you here. You look like you can translate there. We put you here. You look like you can translate there. We put you here. You look like you're a dude there. He's even getting reps at Cheetah, right? So this is a dude who's pushing for free safety position, getting reps at Cheetah as a true freshman. He hasn't been at Oklahoma for 8 months. Really impressive stuff out of Peyton Bowen. 5-star guy, one of the best prospects in the nation, the number 2 safety, as I said, could be a great addition for this Oklahoma defense because of the versatility he has. And that's an area we talk about all the time when it comes to Brent Venables. The versatility these players can bring to the table can allow Brent Venables to do a lot defensively, a ton defensively, which is one of the reasons why I think he originated that Cheetah position in the manner he did, because of the flexibility it allowed for him to play with on every other level of the game. I mean, it is fascinating stuff to really sit here and theory craft the different cheetahs Oklahoma could come out with, why each cheetah would be used in which situation, talking about a McCullough, talking about a Justin Harrington. We get some fascinating thought pieces now when we start thinking about the schematics behind this. It gets really interesting. But a true freshman on defense to know for Oklahoma, Peyton Bowen, write it down, take it to the bank right now. They have some other guys. Wagner, really impressing. But I think the flexibility of Peyton Bowen being a guy that has really stood out to the coaching staff is someone who, if anything happens in that secondary, he'll just raise his hand. Say, put me in, coach. And they might just put him in. He is that gifted. Great pickup for Brent Venables. Great pickup for the Oklahoma Sooners. Once again, ending this out, going to repeat myself a little bit. You love that they get him. You love that they keep the pipeline in Denton. I think that's a fantastic win. Let's keep in the Big 12 in a team that, like Oklahoma, will be making a big move. And once again, like Oklahoma, I'm going to give you 2 players for the Texas Longhorns. Now, my honorable mention for Texas is Jonte Cook. Because Jonte Cook, I think if y'all have watched the channel for a while, it's no secret, I'm really high on the young man. I think he is otherworldly gifted. I think he is Himothy. I think that whenever he gets his opportunity, he is going to do fantastic stuff for that Texas offense. But they have 2 cats on defense that when I was texting someone who I consider to be one of the foremost sources, the foremost minds for Texas football, he and I were texting back and forth last night. And I was saying, I'm putting together this list of some true freshmen that I'm going to talk about tomorrow. I'm talking about one name right here. We haven't said it yet, but Jonte Cook. Should I put him on the list? He said, yeah, Jonte's looking really good, really talented player, going to have a great career here. But he gave me a name that in fairness I've heard, and a name that I should have been a bit more keyed in on. One that Texas is really excited about right now. Now, we've talked about Anthony Hill, and it's not him. It's not Anthony Hill, though we're going to get to Anthony Hill. No, the name we need to talk about is no other than Malik Muhammad, a fantastic addition to the Texas recruiting class last year, an individual who the Crimson Tide were after, several big-name colleges were after because he is that gifted. They were able to go into South Oak Cliff, keep him in the state of Texas, which for the Longhorns, very important. But this is a guy that was a quasi 5-star for the 24/7 Sports Composite. He came in as the number 45 player in the nation. Remember, there are typically only 32 5-stars. So, he was right in line with that 5-star ranking, the number 4 cornerback in the nation and the number 8 player in the state of Texas. So truly one of the most gifted players in the nation. Well, he has turned heads in this Texas secondary. He is a guy that is competing for some reps. Don't be surprised if you see a true freshman out there in that Texas secondary making plays, and it's Malik Muhammad. Whenever I was texting the individual I was texting with last night, that was the name they gave me. I said, okay, I'm going to talk about Anthony Hill. I think I might talk about Jonte Cook. Those the names you would go with, and he instantly replied, Malik Muhammad. That's the name you need to know. That's high praise. Because if you listen to what they have said about Jonte Cook, the coaches, they're very excited about him. If you listen to what they said about Anthony Hill, I think they are elated. I don't know that there's a better word and a better adjective to describe how that Texas coaching staff feels about that win. The biggest win of their recruiting class last year, and that's a recruiting class that contained the number 1 recruit in the nation, Arch Manning, the number 1 quarterback in the nation. I contend that as big of a win as Arch Manning is, Anthony Hill is probably a bigger win. Now, maybe you could argue that the Anthony Hill win was in part due to the avalanche that Arch Manning created, and that's a completely fair take. But Anthony Hill, in my opinion, was the biggest win for Texas. So Malik Muhammad coming in there and showing, hey, I'm going to compete for this position. I'm going to make my presence known. That's exactly what you want to see. For Texas, you want to be able to get in, recruit blue chip guys, but more important than recruit them, because I know what someone's already going to say, they've always recruited blue chip guys, 100% right. You have got to develop them if you're Texas. You have got to take the talent you have and develop it. And I like the coaches on this staff to be able to do that because of the history they've had developing elsewhere. They just need to be allowed to do it. And this is the time where we're going to start hopefully seeing some of that. But seeing a Malik Muhammad, seeing the excitement that last night as I'm sitting here putting this list together, making my rounds, texting who I need to text, getting the names together, they say, hey, this is a name you have got to talk about. Malik Muhammad, one of the best prospects in the class of 2023, a phenomenal addition to the Texas Longhorns, one they're going to be very excited about. But keeping on the defensive side of the football, my goodness, whenever we're talking about big wins, and I already gave a spoiler, Anthony Hill, I don't know in last year's recruiting class as a whole, for every college in the nation, if we're doing the top 10 biggest wins of last cycle's recruiting class, I think Anthony Hill to Texas would have to be a top 5 win. Totally. in the entire recruiting class last year, a top 5 win. And I know there are some people who are recoiling as I say that, but think about it here. You have the Texas Longhorns, whose biggest need is inside linebacker, go out and get the number 1 inside linebacker in the nation after they just lost a guy. They need someone to rush off the edge. That's their second biggest need. Now, they got Colin Simmons in this class, but if we focus specifically on Anthony Hill, not only did they get the number 1 inside linebacker in the nation, that same source I just texted told me he's their best third down pass rusher. Anthony Hill. The kid is spectacular, ladies and gentlemen. Anthony Hill is going to be a star in my estimation at the college level, and I'm very excited for him. Got to watch him play several times here in Denton, and he turned heads. Unbelievably gifted player, but it is awesome to hear from the Texas side, people say our biggest need was an inside linebacker. We got that, and we love his play there. But our second biggest need was edge, and our inside linebacker may have touched on both needs. He's that gifted. Now, in a perfect world, you're going to get him to settle in, but at the same time, if you have the ability to have him be a difference maker, you have him be a difference maker. So Anthony Hill, a name I am so excited for. Denton, I mean, goodness gracious, guys. We talk about the players coming out of the city of Denton, and it is wild. You have Jackson Arnold with Oklahoma, 5-star quarterback from Denton Guyer. You have Anthony Hill from Denton Guyer. I mean, the players that Denton is sending to go play college football, it's extreme now. And Anthony Hill, Peyton Bowen, they're going to be the headliners of this class. And the only reason why you didn't hear me talk about Jackson Arnold is simply because Dylan Gabriel exists, right? Peyton Bowen, he will probably see some starting time this year. Anthony Hill will see some starting time this year. Malik Muhammad will see some starting time this year. Zachariah Branch, they will see some starting time this year. I don't doubt Jackson Arnold's ability. So if there's no U fan in here wondering why he's not on the list, look, I've been very high on him. I was saying he was a top quarterback when he was a 4-star. When he was a number 120 in the nation, something like that, I say he was a 5-star. It's just, you have a quarterback. So some other freshmen you need to know. So we've talked about USC, wide receiver. Oklahoma, I gave you a safety and a wide receiver. For Texas, we stayed completely on the defensive side of the ball, but now we turn to the Crimson Tide. Because there's talk of a freshman for Alabama that I have not heard in quite some time. And what's spectacular is it's not relegated to one. There's a few that you hear about and you say, that's different. We haven't heard this in a long time. Let's start with the guy that I'm most excited about. If you told me, Ty, one freshman in college football you can't wait to see, give me the name, there wouldn't be a hesitation. It wouldn't be a hesitation at all. It would be Caleb Downs. Caleb Downs, to me, is sensational. I thought that he was maybe the biggest win for Alabama's recruiting class because both defensive backs, both safeties, went to the NFL. So Alabama had an immediate need at safety. If you were that dude, you could come in here and compete for playing time. Well, they found that dude. His name's Caleb Downs from the state of Georgia. Played for Mill Creek. 6 foot, 203 pounds per the 24/7 Sports composite. Per 24/7 Sports rankings, they have him as the number 8 player in the nation, the number 1 safety, and the number 1 player in the state of Georgia. And I think if we look at the 24/7 Sports composite, he came in as the number 5 player in the nation or the number 6 player in the nation, number 1 safety, number 1 player in the state of Georgia. No matter how you slice it, Caleb Downs is different. There have been reports coming out of Alabama. There have been reports coming from independent media saying that Caleb Downs might be the best safety prospect since Minka. Now, let's not put those expectations on him. All we need Caleb Downs to be is Caleb Downs. That being said, I have rarely heard Nick Saban talk about a freshman the way he talks about Caleb Downs. And I'm going to tell you all something that's eye-opening. Whenever I was putting this together and I started once again doing the rounds, the other night we were having our little meeting for the final whistle, the Bama Standard crew, and we were all talking, and one of the notes someone said was, you know, Caleb Downs is a true freshman safety in a secondary that's got a lot of talent in it now. Terrion Arnold was almost a 5-star. Kool-Aid was a 5-star. Trey Amos comes in there and is looking really good. You have Malachi Moore, who's a vet in there. I mean, you've got Earl Little Jr., who I think his ceiling is otherworldly. Probably made the play of the spring game on his interception on the crossing route. Just an unbelievable play. You have all of them. And the source was saying, you have all this talent in this Alabama secondary, a lot of them blue chip guys, a lot of them experienced, and Caleb Downs stands out like a sore thumb with all of that talent. That is spectacular to hear. This is an individual that is a true difference maker in every sense of the word. And I think the thing that's most fascinating to me is the fact that Alabama was able to go into the state of Georgia and pull him, and it was one of their biggest positions of need. Now, that and defensive line. But Caleb Downs is someone who is already pushing for first-team reps, and I think he's going to be your starting safety. Ladies and gentlemen, I said it here first. I don't think that there's any controversy there. I don't think that that's a hot take. I think that that's fairly passive when you listen to the way that he's been talked about. I think that Alabama found their guy, and Caleb Downs looks to be that dude. Let's continue for Alabama. We'll go to the offensive side of the ball because there's two names I have to give you on the offensive side of the ball that you need to look out for. Let's start with the name that I think you'd be remiss if you missed out on, and that's Caden Proctor. 5-star offensive tackle. In my opinion, I had him as the number 1 offensive tackle in last year's class. That being said, though, if you told me, Ty, loved Caden Proctor, had him as a 5-star, but, it was real tough for me to rank Okunlola, Malinois, and Caden Proctor. Look, I hear you. Malinois is already there in Miami. We're going to get to him. He's turning heads. He is a monster out there at Miami, but so too is Caden Proctor. I mean, you talk about some tackles in last year's class that were spectacular. Caden Proctor, ladies and gentlemen, is already working with the ones. And I'm the guy who will give the take all of the time that I am never surprised when offensive line come in and take their time getting adjusted because of the difference in size, speed, strength, and technique required to be successful at the next level. Caden Proctor is saying to hell with all of that. I am that dude. That's what Alabama needs on that offensive line. It's been an offensive line that I think the best word I could use for it coming off of Doug Marrone was timid. That's not Alabama football. Alabama football has been a lot of things in the past. Timid ain't one of them. That needed to go by the wayside, which is part of the reason why I was so excited when Coach Eric Wolford came in here, because he's not timid. He went toe-to-toe against Alabama for several prospects when he was the offensive line coach at Kentucky and won. Berrien Brown, Keontae Goodwin, 2 battles, he won over Bama. All he's done is come into the Crimson Tide and be a phenomenal recruiter. And it's the edge he's recruiting with. And that, to me, is what I love so much. Caden Proctor is going to be a guy that I think really develops into the next Alabama offensive tackle that takes the NFL draft by storm. He has got all the tools. He stands 6'7" and he moves like a cat. That was such a big win for the Crimson Tide. And let's be very honest here. Coach Wolford did a phenomenal job with that offensive line class last year. We're talking McVay. We're talking about Alinen. We had some great additions come in, none bigger than Caden Proctor. None. You flip him from Iowa. And I get it. It's Iowa. Someone in the chat right now, I can already hear them saying, but Ty, Bama flipped him from Iowa. It's Alabama versus Iowa. I hear you, but the one area Iowa does well is their offensive line. That's why when he committed, I was like, okay, well, there's a very real chance they don't flip him. Because their offensive line, that's spoken for. I mean, they can get you to the NFL there, no doubt there. But Caden Proctor, phenomenal. Staying on the offensive side of the ball, how about somebody that Caden Proctor will be blocking for? And this is one that I have been so blown away by because I knew Richard Young, I knew Justice Haynes were otherworldly talented. I don't think there was anybody that questioned that. But I already thought Alabama's running back room was exciting, that it had the names. But as time has gone on, ladies and gentlemen, a true freshman is a name you just keep hearing time and time again, and that's Justice Haynes. Now, don't get me wrong. This is Jace's year. Jace McClellan is running back 1, and he is going to put college football on notice. You heard it here first. I have maintained this. I have said it since he was a true freshman. Jace, if given the opportunity, is going to explode. He has the tools. He is a very, very, very well-rounded running back. I don't think he's ever gotten the flowers he's deserved. This is going to be the year to change that, and I can't wait. This is Jace's season. But let's be very clear. You still have a very talented running back behind him in a Roydell Williams. You still have a very gifted running back in the fold in Jamarian Miller, who personally I think is the name we're not talking about enough. Jamarian Miller. And through all of that, you're hearing, hey, there's this cat, 5-star out of Georgia, who, oh yeah, by the way, was a Georgia legacy, who is becoming impossible to ignore. And that's what I asked the quarterbacks. Be impossible. Be undeniable in everything you do. Be undeniable. Justice Haynes has been undeniable. Let's keep talking about some freshmen that you have got to know. Let's hit some comments first. PG with the PG show says, what up, Ty? PG, glad you're in here. As always, man, good to see you. Van Edwards says, my personal opinion and definitely a hot take. Ty Simpson never starts a game for Alabama and eventually transfers. Look, that's going to be an interesting situation. The one thing that I think I need to see is what does Julian Sayin come in here and do? Because if Julian Sayin is who we expect him to be, it's going to be really tough to keep him off the field unless one of these quarterbacks really just takes the job and once again is undeniable. Ty Simpson, very talented, but it's just the timing of the situation. It's the transitions, kind of an unfortunate timing. Interesting to see. Mark says, don't forget about Baxter. He's going to put up for some numbers for Texas as well. No doubt, Mark. And Baxter was an individual who almost like some other guys, I should have had an honorable mention list, and Baxter would have been on it, almost like a Jonte Cook, where, Mark, and you've heard me say this before, I think Jonte Cook is going to be that dude for Texas. In fact, I think his upside, maybe a hot take, I think he might have arguably, look, I'm not going to say he has the highest upside in the room, but I think his upside is as high as any wide receiver in that room. It's as high as anybody in that room. He is that good. But it's the depth you have in front, right? And exactly the same with Baxter. Mark, I completely agree with you. Baxter is phenomenally gifted, very, very talented, going to be a huge addition to Texas, but you have Blue. You have Brooks. You have some guys that, I mean, they're going to be workhorses now, and you have Baxter in the fold. So awesome to see there. Iowa has always had great offensive linemen, tight ends, and defensive linemen. Technique, power, athletic, they produce in those two areas. No doubt about it, Van. Jace has averaged 5.8 yards per carry on 112 carries behind an average O-line. Speak to me, Van, because Jace McClellan, in my opinion, is one of the most underappreciated college football players, period. Not running backs, college football players in the nation. The numbers he puts up are palpable. I mean, very, very impressive. I just go back, Van, to that Arkansas game his freshman year where he had a little crease and he hit the edge and was gone. And that's when I knew. Granted, I got to watch him in high school, right? Alito right down the street. I remember him and JoJo Earl on the same team. And it was like, y'all remember when NBA used to put out those and one mixtapes? Y'all remember that? Because that's what it looked like whenever JoJo Earl and Jace McClellan were at Alito. It looked like an and one mixtape of them just bawling on kids. I mean, it didn't look like football. It really looked like we'd transitioned into a whole new thing of these two just going out there and styling on him. Really hope JoJo Earl has a good season at TCU as well. Whenever we talk on Wednesday, we'll do some transfer portal guys. He's going to be a name I talk about. Really big fan of JoJo Earl. Really hoping he has a big season. Cody Gore says, I think Jam and Justice will be better than Jason Rydell. Maybe, Cody, the only thing I'll say is Jace is a guy that he's been injured, right? Like he's dealt with lingering injuries and not good offensive line play. I'll take it a step further than Van. Van said 12 carries, 112 carries behind an average O-line. Some of those offensive lines, especially with Doug Marrone, and I get it, Van's not referencing that, but same point. Jace has had to run behind some bad offensive lines. Let's be very honest here. That offensive line Bama had under Doug Marrone, that wasn't average. That was a bad offensive line. By every metric, that was a bad offensive line. Talented as all hell, but bad. Bryce was the most pressured, one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the nation. I mean, it was by the grace of God himself they were able to get anything done, and by how talented they were. Truly incredible when you start really thinking about how far that Alabama team went with an offensive line who, Mark, you'll appreciate this. We give Texas hell about the offensive line that Steve Sarkisian walked into, the first one he had. They graded better than that Alabama offensive line that same year. Think about that. No, let that marinate for a second. Whenever Sark first got to Texas, everybody gave him hell for that offensive line, and deservedly so. It wasn't very good. That wasn't his control. He couldn't help that. He inherited it. Done great work on it since. Kyle Flood's unbelievable. They graded better than the Bama offensive line. Bama was in the national championship. Now, I'm not saying that Texas should have been, far from the case. I'm saying that's how wild it was that they were there with an offensive line that porous. And Bryce Young just... I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. Anybody in chat, have you ever seen Bryce Young and Harry Houdini in the same room? Because I don't think right now we can, in good faith, say that they're not the same person. I've never seen them in the same room. Matt says, I think USC is going to suck. Plus, look at their recruiting, straight trash. Matt, I don't think they're going to suck. I think USC is going to be a very good team. I don't think anybody bats an eyelash if USC makes the college football playoffs. But the question is, are they a national championship caliber team? And I think the answer there is no. I think they have national championship caliber offense. I think they have national championship caliber quarterback. But I've maintained this for years. For years. If you're not balanced, you're going to have a lot of trouble. And I just have to be shown. Matt asked, does Bama have a starting quarterback? It's a quarterback competition still, Matt. It is what it is. I'm less worried about the quarterback competition and more worried about some other aspects for Alabama, if I'm being 100% honest. I have faith in every quarterback that once they get going, they can all be talented. They all have something to offer. I have my preferences. I can tell you who I'd like to be the guy. And don't get me wrong, if you're telling me, if your next comment, Matt, is, but wouldn't you rather have a quarterback known than be going into this late in camp with a quarterback competition? Yes, 100%. We talked about this on the SEC Connect. You always would rather have your quarterback situation solved whenever you're at this stage of fall camp, because then that guy is getting reps. Everybody, like, the pecking order is truly being established. I wish that was the case. That's not the case right now, but at the same time, like I said, Ty Simpson, very talented guy. I think once he gets kind of sure of himself, he's going to be the dude. He's going to be a very talented dude. Jalen Milroe offers so much instantly in terms of offense, and I think if we get an offense that's tailored to what he does well, he could be a guy that defenses really don't want to see. Heck, I'm going to tell you this right here, talking to some people, I can tell you the quarterback opposing defenses don't want to see. And that's Jalen Milroe. And that's not coming from me. That's coming from me talking to some people. And they've told me, hey, yeah, like I agree with your take, Ty, that it really doesn't matter who the quarterback is. Bama's going to do what they do. It's going to be a run-first offense. It's going to be a power offense. That being said, we'd rather it not be Milroe. So interesting. But yeah, the quarterback position is one we have to watch. Matt asked, do you think Williams-Nwaneri flips when Missouri head coach loses his job? If Drink loses his job, that whole thing is going to be suspect because, look, it's one thing to want to stay home. And, guys, we need to understand this is a very real pitch. I think that, and I could be wrong, but talking to Unfair, talking to Jay, talking to some people, it was less about NIL and more about proximity for Williams-Nwaneri. Because from what I've been told, I don't know that OU matched the NIL offer, but I was told they got very close. At the very worst, they got real close. This was about proximity. But that being said, Matt, if Drink isn't there, I mean, you don't want to roll the dice on uncertainty. And yes, we can argue right now that there is uncertainty at Missouri, even with Drink being there, but at least there's a calming force, right? At least when there's a head coach there, you have a calming force. That's a legit question now, Matt. That's a very legit question. Now, if you talk to some Missouri people, they're really excited, right? You talk to some college football people, they're really excited about what Missouri could be this year, about the upside they have. Once again, I'm very much this year in college football. I feel like I got burned a little bit last year. I got burned by a few teams, by my Tide, by OU. So I'm in very much like a show me phase of college football for everybody, for everybody. And we'll talk about this. Larry, welcome in. But Mark, if you're still in here, you can attest to this. I'm very high on Texas. But every time I talk about, oh, Texas could do this, could do that, I follow it up with, but most importantly, you got to show me. Very high on Alabama. They got to show me. Because last year was such a talented team, and they were so undisciplined. You got to show me this year. I'm not anointing anybody because, God, that kicked me in the butt last year. But yeah, I think that that's a very, very real possibility. Richard says, what's up, everybody? Happy you're in here, Richard. Hope you're enjoying your Monday. College football is here. Couldn't have come at a better time. Van says, Milroe just needs the timing. Working the ones consistently, learning the language will help. People forget he was the in high school. He was the throw first guy in high school. Yeah, he's got the arm talent. He's got the arm talent, and people are really unfair. Van, we talked about this whenever you were on the final whistle, and you've heard me say it multiple times. People are trying to say Jalen Milroe is not going to be successful because they watched him come in and try and run Bryce Young's offense. Ladies and gentlemen, we're running out of time, so I'm not going to go through the whole song and dance of what that Bryce Young offense looked like, but what I will say is this. Bryce Young, there weren't 10 quarterbacks in college football that, in my opinion, were asked to do more pre-snap, post-snap than Bryce Young. I mean, he was basically running an NFL offense through and through. His football IQ is special, ladies and gentlemen. Bryce is a different cat. He really is. I really wish I would have gotten the opportunity to talk to him, chop it up with him, pick his brain about football, because his football IQ is through the roof. Now, before we get out of here, quickly, I do need to give you one more freshman you need to be aware of. Unfortunately, I got a little bit deep into the weeds talking about some this, that, and the other, but, that's what these are. This is the live shows. It's structured, but we're still going to have the fan interaction because that's fun for me. It's fun for you. And it allows us to really cultivate the feeling we want here, which is we're all just sitting around the table talking college football. The guy that you need to know, we're going to go out to Miami. I don't think it's any surprise whenever I take you to Miami and we start talking about true freshmen you need to know. Some of you already, the observant in here, will have probably guessed we're going to talk about an offensive lineman. Now, why the observant will have guessed that? Well, Mario Cristobal is an offensive line guy, and he brings in Alex Mirabal, which those two have worked together for years. They have got a really tight relationship. But the offensive line recruiting they just did at Miami was spectacular. You get Okunlola and you get Mauanoa, but the name we're going to focus on today is Francis Mauanoa. Because already, from what I am hearing, he has hemmed up that right tackle position, and he doesn't look to give it back. Now, this is a guy who, whenever he was coming out of high school, the question wasn't, will he translate? That was a question I never asked. My question was, where will they put him? Will they put him at tackle? Will they put him at guard? Because he can play it all. He can play it all. I don't know that he's ever played center. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you he could be their starting center because that's a totally different ball game in terms of the cerebral nature of the position. But you get what I'm saying. Talent-wise, I mean, he's got the talent to do anything along the offensive line, already hemming up that right tackle position. Now, the reason why I present him to you is because if there was a true freshman for Miami that I have complete faith that coaching staff can get right, it's the offensive line guys. I have complete faith that between Cristobal and Mirabal, they're going to get those guys right. That offensive line is going to look good. The rest of Miami, I have some questions about, right? Really interested to see what the offensive unit as a whole looks like. Van Dyke was a guy that coming into last year was supposed to be a top 10 quarterback in the nation. That fell by the wayside. And so if you're Mario Cristobal right now, you need to figure out this offense because that was the one question I had on Mario Cristobal when he was at Oregon. They had a very successful offense. He had Herbert in there throwing for a lot of yards, but so much of it was behind the line of scrimmage. It was something like 30% of Oregon's offense with Mario Cristobal was screen passes. That's what made Herbert such an interesting evaluation when he was coming out, is you knew that he had the tools, but what you saw from him in college was so many screen passes, and you're like, how does this translate? Well, we know the tools ended up taking over. Very talented guy. But Francis Mauigoa, the name you need to watch out for. Guys, we're going to be getting out of here. But as you can see down at this little bar at the bottom, Home Field, as you can see the banner above us, they are gracious enough to work with the channel. And ladies and gentlemen, a lot of Home Field merch will be dropping. We'll talk about it more on Wednesday, but don't wait. Get your drop, because Home Field, best vintage logos in the game, and they have you hooked up. Use code ATTS15 for 15% off your first order, and your favorite team, they've got it. And I guarantee you go there, you find something, you're going to find something you really like. Like I said, we'll talk about it Wednesday. All the new drops are coming out. I'll have what teams are dropping which day. That way you're sure not to miss your team's favorite drop. And like I said, use code ATTS15. It'll get you 15% off your first order. It helps the channel. It helps you. It helps us with Home Field. All around a great deal. Until Wednesday, we'll see you next time. That's it.